I am the membership and groups manager. Um, my role at Woodcraft Oak is to support groups and support the membership and screening processes. And obviously, PVG kind of lands in my lap because I help process a lot of your applications. Thank you for coming along this evening. Fleur, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself. I know,
Uh,
Ali.
I've
Go.
I am a Scottish officer, and I used to do a lot to do with disclosures, but then it all got transferred down south. But I'm still on the fringes a bit and have to know what's going on. So and how it's specifically affecting Scotland because it's obviously different legislation up here. So I'm in helping out with Leanne, and we've put this together for you.
So yeah, as we mentioned before, there has been some legislative changes to the PVG membership scheme that we wanted to kind of introduce to all of our membership secretaries and group coordinators to kind of get you up to speed on what's happening in Scotland and to make sure that you are kind of all following the law and the guidelines that have been set out by Disclosure Scotland. So we're going to start with the presentation now. Okay. Okay. So from the 1st of April, there are going to be the following let me just sorry, minimize this. The following legislative changes. So 1st of April 2025, if any volunteers working with children under the age of 18 have to have a PVG membership. It will be a legal requirement from the 1st of April. And also the results of the PVG disclosure need to be received by the organisation before the volunteer commences their helping out at a group or a regulated activity. Also, from April 2026, PV membership will need to be renewed every 5 years. The implementation process of that is going to be starting towards the end of the year. Currently, obviously, PVGs run just for volunteers. They continue to do a continuation every year. But from obviously April next year, there will be requirements to renew that PVG membership every 5 years. And we'll obviously let you know more about that when the time comes. Oops, sorry, apologies. Okay. The other change that's coming in is that there'll be no PVG check-in for under 16s. Previously, we could do PVG disclosures for 15-year-olds, and this sometimes happened when young people were doing like the Duke of Edinburgh and stuff like that. But from obviously April the 1st, this will not be available for under 16s. And also, obviously, to stay legally compliant, the PVG record is required. You are required to keep the PVG record up to date. And that means letting them know any changes of addresses, contact details, that kind of stuff. And you can do that by emailing them, and their email address is on our website, along with all the guidelines regarding all of these changes. So, as I mentioned before, it will be a legal requirement from the 1st of April 2025 for volunteers aged 16 plus working with children under 18 to have a PVG. It will become an offence for anyone carrying out a regulated role to do so whilst not a member of the PVG scheme. So, a regulated role for us falls under group helper, group coordinator, someone who's regularly in contact with children, helping out at group nights and overnight stays. PVG membership and results must be in place before a volunteer starts their position. So that means them actually completing the full application and then sharing the results with the membership team so that we have details of your disclosure. A new volunteer who has scheme membership working with children can begin to volunteer right away, providing their scheme the application is in process. So for any of your volunteers that are come to group and want to start volunteering and they already have a PVG working with children, then they can start volunteering with Woodcraft Folk. However, they also still need to make sure that you're still completing the existing PVG membership application for them, and that's allowing us to be listed on their record. So that if there are any issues that come up on their criminal record, we are made aware of it. So we're kind of noting ourselves onto their scheme membership. The legislation that's being brought in does not allow for supervised roles or any induction or taster sessions. So obviously, when you're recruiting volunteers, they can't come in and do a taster session with you and helping out at a group night activity or an overnight stay. They need to have their PVG membership in place. Obviously, this is a big change that they're introducing in April, and so the PVG Disclosure Scotland are allowing a 3 months grace period for those who are already volunteering but do not yet have their PVG membership in place. We are going through our current membership records, and I will be contacting all volunteers that we have on our records with up-to-date membership and that do not have a PVG, and letting them know about this change and the requirement to complete an application for us if they are still active. We'll also let membership secretaries know as well who these people are in their districts, and they can also let us know whether actually they're not volunteering anymore. So we'll be sending that out in the next week or so that we can make sure that everyone is following the legislation and from the 1st of April. Okay, so last year I think it was introduced that we now, instead of the organisation receiving a copy of a disclosure certificate, um, volunteers are now required to share their online results with us. Obviously, the PVG application process is online, and then volunteers then, once they receive an email from Volunteer Scotland regarding their results, they need to then go onto the portal. They're sent an email with a link, and they then click on the link, and they have to create some login details, and then they need to follow the process to share those results with us. Those results need to be shared with us. I think Fleur sent something to me today. I think you have 10 days to share those results with us. So it's really, really important that you are reminding your volunteers, applicants, etc., that they need to share these results with us before they start volunteering. We will obviously do some chasing if someone starts the online application process with us. We obviously make a record of that, and we will continue to chase those individuals. But obviously, we do need your help to make sure that they are aware of the process and that they're also sharing those results with us, because they shouldn't be volunteering without sharing those results with us. If for any reason the online portal is not working, they can share a paper copy with us. And as I said before, we'll continue to chase any outstanding results. As I said before, a volunteer's PVG application is not complete if they do not share the results with Craftfolk. So it's really, really important. All the guidance about how to share results, how to do online applications is still on the same page on the website. And there is some guidance as well about obviously all the new changes that are going to be coming in. Okay, so failure to share results. The volunteer will be committing an offence if they are found to be volunteering without a PVG. So as I said before, and I'll continue to stress, it's really, really important that any new volunteers or any existing volunteers that haven't had their PVG application completed, then they need to get this done within the 3 months grace period. We're unable to complete our screening without PVG results. Obviously, we need to see a copy of the results so that we can say, yes, okay to be working with children, they're suitable, etc. So it's really important that they share the results with us. Obviously, if after a period of time we haven't heard from the applicant who started the online process, we will contact all the safeguard leads in the district and the membership secretary, making them aware that this is still outstanding. So we will try and keep in as much contact with yourselves as we can to kind of make sure this volunteer shares the results, or to let us know that they're no longer going to be volunteering with the group. So obviously, if the individual does not share the results with us, they'll be unable to volunteer until such time they complete that step, which is obviously with the laws coming in, it's obviously really important they get that done. Otherwise, obviously, they can't volunteer. So I think that's the end of my slides. And so obviously I've just taken you kind of through the screening process, and just letting you be aware of the changes that are coming in. And Fleur's going to talk a bit about recruiting volunteers, and obviously the about having the induction sessions and taster sessions and so forth, how we can get around that and support the kind of recruitment process. So I'll hand it over to Fleur.
Thanks, Leanne. So of the important changes that are happening, one is that Leanne's just outlined a bit, which is that individuals will be committing an offence if they take up a regulated role that requires a PVG, which is all our roles in group leaders and helpers. But also the organisation will now be committing offence, and this is a bit different from previous legislation. So from the 1st of April, any organisation including us, to offer any type of regulated role to an individual will be committing offence unless they have received a PVG scheme disclosure and we have seen the results and made a decision on those results. So obviously this has implications for how you recruit, and also I want to also look at the perspective of the volunteer as well, because as well as it having implications for how we recruit and advertise and bring an organization, bring a person into the organization, a volunteer, I also want to look at it as their kind of the volunteer's own perspective as well, because a lot of them are not going to know a lot of this information. Yeah, move the slide, please. So recruitment process, groups must ensure all existing, new and future group leaders and helpers over 16 have a completed PVG scheme disclosure through WCRAFO. So we need to be, and the groups need to be really clear when a prospective volunteer is visiting the group as an observer, rather than coming along and starting to help out and seeing how things work, being really strict upon what an observer is and who they are and what they're able to do, which is not much, and they must be supervised at all times. And then groups must also ensure that any observer does not engage in any childcare, and that the observer knows that they will be committing an offence if they do so. Obviously, a lot of individuals are not going to know all of this stuff. It's been, it's not out there. I mean, it's public available, but, the average person walking down the street who thinks, oh, I might go and volunteer for this group is not going to know all this stuff. So it really is important for groups to help volunteers understand the new changes in the law and what this means for them. Okay, next slide. Thanks. So thinking about the volunteer themselves, you need to be really clear to communicate with new volunteers about that the change means that they will now be committing an offence if they carry out a regulated role whilst not being a member of the PVG scheme, and ensure that they need to either consent to share the disclosure with WCRAFO, which they might not, but then they can't volunteer, or B, notify Disclosure Scotland that they'll seek a review of the contents prior to sharing. So a lot of these changes coming in have, obviously have reasons, and the reason for this particular thing where volunteers get to see their results before the organisation, which didn't happen before, is because sometimes things were shared that people didn't want shared or didn't realise were still on their record. So this gives more power to the volunteer to decide what they want to disclose or not, if there's anything on it. More rights, really, basically. And then also groups will need to consider how they give information to a new volunteer and how they take that journey of the onboarding process for new volunteers with all the new legislation in mind. In practice, I don't think it will be that different than what we already do, because I'm hoping that there's not that any, hopefully, volunteers that are already or volunteering in groups without a PVG. I think there was previously maybe a slight grey area between coming along, seeing what it was like, and then a few weeks later starting your PVG journey, which will no longer be able to take place. But other than that, I don't think it's going to be vastly different. Next slide. So I just had a few thoughts about what this actually means. So if you do follow an induction checklist, which we used to have a very long time ago, or you've got one yourself that the district's made, you might have to look at that and see. You might think about the order of how you do things, like a welcome, a visit, an observer visit, and then straight away into an PVG application. We need to think about the observer role. We need to think about visitors who are not observers. So I was thinking in particular about someone coming in to help lead the group night for some special activity or something. They're likely to have PVG disclosure through their organisation if they used to be doing things with children and under 18s, but they might not. And it might be not a regular thing in their role. So it really depends on each individual role as to whether it's qualifies for being a regulated role or not. And we also need to think about who is responsible at each session for making sure everyone who's over 16 has a completely PVG scheme disclosure. Is that going to be, is the safeguarding person for that group there every night? Is there someone taking a register of volunteers as well as young people and making sure that everyone there has got the PVG? So we need to think about that. And volunteers who are already PVG scheme members, as Leanne was saying, must still complete an existing application if they've already got a PVG for the childcare workforce, or if they've got a PVG but it's not for children, it's for vulnerable adults. They now have to do a join application, which is different to previously, and do it through Woodcraft Oak. And then there's also some considerations around wood chip groups, because parents and carers must stay at wood chip sessions for our insurance for anyone under 6. So what do we do in those cases? And we think that the parents are okay, because it's like any other toddler group which must be having the same kind of considerations going on at the moment, but that there must be at least 2 leaders who are PVG'd and members who take responsibility for the session and are supervising at all times. And there could be more things, which is the last thing there, that you might yourself come up with some things about, what about this? I haven't covered that, or how that might have an implication. So tonight might be an opportunity to think about those things too. And I think